Добрий день.
Good morning. I want to thank everybody who joins us in Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform. We continue our operation. My name is Olga Atamanova. It's year 9 of the war and day 282 of the full-scale invasion of the Russian aggressor in our land, and I want to thank the representatives of all the mass media who tell the world the truth about this war. Our schedule for today is as follows. Joining us online at 12 o'clock will be Alexander Sienkiewicz, the mayor of Mykolaiv. We will talk about the situation in Mykolaiv. At 12:30, joining us online will be Ivan Fedorov, the mayor of Melitopol, and we'll talk about the situation in Zaporizhzhia region. And right now we will be talking about the prevention of the human trafficking and protection of Ukrainians in the European Union and the situation with the deportation of our people to Russian Federation. We have three speakers today, and they're Kateryna Pavlichenko, Deputy Interior Minister of Ukraine, Chisi Müller, Senior Protection Coordinator at International Organization for Migration in Ukraine, and Yuri Parkhomenko, Department of the Migration Policy of the National Police of Ukraine. I want to invite Ms. Kateryna first, please. Thanks a lot. Good morning, everybody. Today, on the day of the cancellation of slavery, we will be talking about the prevention of human trafficking. Human trafficking unfortunately still exists today, and it's a form of modern slavery which does not lose its actuality, specifically under the conditions of a full-scale war, full-scale invasion, and labor exploitation or involvement in different forms of slavery, which are mostly widespread in the world. We're facing new challenges today. They are the relocation of millions of Ukrainians abroad, humanitarian crisis we're facing, and relocation of Ukrainians looking for safer shelters, and the forcible deportation of Ukrainians, including children, to Russian Federation, to Belarus, and to temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion of the Russian Federation within the country and abroad, according to the information from the open sources, more than 11.5 million persons were relocated. And talking about Western countries, which really provided support, provided shelter to a lot of our Ukrainian citizens. Russia, on their end, they forcibly deport Ukrainians, both men and women and children. They have them undergo filtration procedures, and in fact, they're deporting people camouflaged as evacuation, which is a violation of international humanitarian law, and we'll never stop talking about that. And the national police teams are engaged in identification of all those persons who were forcibly deported. Today, human trafficking is a burning problem again, and one of the areas where we have to protect our citizens is prevention of them getting into the traps of the human traffickers in the Western countries. We understand that really many Ukrainians found the safe shelter there. However, unfortunately, the criminals, they are being vigilant, and they try to find those Ukrainian men and women who end up in difficult situations, and having ended up in that condition, in those circumstances, they can get into such situation as forcible labor, slavery, involvement in sexual exploitation, and for this reason we have information campaigns in coordination with our colleagues where we explain how people can avoid situations like those not only abroad but in Ukraine too. In this area we're being helped by charity organization, human rights organizations, both in Ukraine and abroad. Ukrainian National Police includes the Department of Migration Policy, which takes care of prevention of human trafficking, and the head of this department will tell more during this briefing today. They cooperate with Europol and Interpol for documenting of any violations of human rights in the context of prevention of human trafficking. And since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, the law enforcement agencies of Europe received more than 50 reports of the possible violations of the rights of Ukrainian citizens abroad, and some of these reports, they resulted in opening of the cases where Ukrainian law enforcement agencies cooperate with their colleagues abroad to identify facts like that and to protect Ukrainian citizens and for bringing the criminals to liability. There is one more important thing I want to draw everyone's attention to during this briefing. Really, today there are more than 1,000 cases of violation of the rules of war. I mean the deportation of Ukrainian citizens to Russian Federation, and according to the National Information Bureau of Ukraine, Russia deported more than 20,000 Ukrainians, and the majority of them are children. According to the information portal Children of War, more than 12,000 children were deported. The National Police helps with identification of those persons, specifically children, and with returning them to Ukraine, but it's a very complicated question, and we do need the support of our international partners and our friendly states, our allies, and we always draw their attention to this subject. In general, that's probably it. And I think that the head of department, Yuri Parhomenko, will tell you more about the operation in this field. Thank you. Thank you. I want to invite Ms. Chisi Miller, and after the interviews by our participants, you may ask your questions, please.
Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the International Organization for Migration, IOM, I am pleased to be here this morning, and thank you to the Ministry of Interior for inviting us to provide some comments regarding human trafficking on this important day to end modern-day slavery. IOM has been working since 1998 here in Ukraine, and we have been a proud partner of the government of Ukraine as well as civil society members to address human trafficking trends using protection, prevention, prosecution, which is the government's responsibility, and partnerships. We know as IOM that there are some estimates that since 1991, according to IOM's estimates, 300,000 Ukrainians have suffered from human trafficking in Ukraine as well as abroad. We also know that from 2019 to 2021, 46,000 Ukrainians have been in situations of human trafficking, mainly labor exploitation as well as sexual exploitation. COVID changed the way in which Ukrainians have been trafficked. So whereas prior to 2020, many Ukrainians were exploited in places like Poland or in the Russian Federation, in 2020 and 2021, in fact, Ukrainians were being exploited within Ukraine. And this prevalence is what worries me. What worries me as IOM in 2022, how is the full-scale invasion impacting Ukraine? How is it impacting the trafficking trends? IOM has tried to provide assistance to more than 20,000 victims of trafficking over the 2 decades we have done our work. And we are trying to continue to do outreach, preventing human trafficking from happening. As the Deputy Minister described, there are millions of Ukrainians on the move trying to get out of harm's way because of the full-scale invasion. We want people to be safe, which is why we have adapted our messaging for this context. The crisis has impacted the way in which people are moving, and it's impacted the way in which people receive information. Even this interview that we're doing today is incredibly important to communicate messages. In February and in March and April, IOM put posters on the trains. We were advertising our hotline number 527, which is a local number. You can call it through your mobile phone. And our operators were answering questions about, can I go to Poland? What does it mean? What are the regulations? Can I go to another place in Ukraine? We did our best to answer those questions to all those millions of Ukrainians on the move. We put the posters up. They have the QR code. Next time you take the train, please look for them. We also adapted our messaging for social media. We recognize that Ukraine is very much a digital-friendly place, that Ukrainians like social media, they like Telegram and other social media outlets. So we have changed our tools so that we can meet and reach the youth of Ukraine. We know from our vulnerability survey that we did in 2022, a few months ago, that 29% of the youth, 15 to 29 years of age, would accept an offer from a person they trusted. That offer for a job, that offer for travel, that's a risky offer. We're asking people to take more consideration, to pay more attention to those offers, to don't believe them at face value, to scrutinize them a bit more. We have also adapted our tools. We have an online quest at quest.stoptrafficking.org. It is deliberately a tool, it's a game. You can play an online game, and through playing this online game, you can learn about safe migration. You can learn key tricks and techniques so that you yourself, when you're promised what seems like a dream job, whether it's in Ukraine or in another country, you learn to ask some questions. What is the labor contract? What is the visa regime? How can I keep myself safe? Have I given my contact information to my family and to my friends so that they can keep in touch with me? Do we have a code word? So if I'm in distress and I say my code word is pineapple, and I tell my family pineapple, they know I'm in trouble and they can contact the police in that country or in Ukraine, and they can try to help me. We also have our safe migration bot on Telegram. It's available. We have operators who answer that chat bot in whatever language you feel comfortable with. And finally, we continue to do our work for protection, prevention, and prosecution. When we get contact information, when we get people asking us questions and they want action now, we refer it to the law enforcement agencies so that they can take action, so that they can intervene and help people who are being exploited. And I would like to end by saying that, in fact, the cases are complicated. The government of Ukraine has been working to counter human trafficking for almost 20 plus years. They have taken institutional steps, which we are encouraged by. I fully recognize that the government of Ukraine is incredibly busy right now in combating the full-scale aggression that is being happened by this invasion. I would ask in 2023 that the government of Ukraine continues to dedicate resources, human resources, of course, so that the officials can continue to work with us to combat human trafficking, in addition to all of the work that the government is doing. Because when we address the cases, wherever they're coming from, the temporarily occupied territories, people coming in for humanitarian assistance, and then we find out they were in situations of labor exploitation, or whether they're people in other places that haven't been occupied, people who are being exploited, that need our support, our collective support, Ministry of Social Policy, Social Services specifically, children needing support, persons who've survived sexual exploitation as well as labor exploitation because they were trafficked. Everyone needs to come together to assist. And we are there. We continue to pledge our support to the government of Ukraine in doing our part as an international organization, a UN agency that's been a partner for a long time. And we will continue to do that.
Дякую вам, дякую за допомогу і за підтримку наших українців. І запрошую Юрія Пархоменка. Прошу, пане Юрію.
Thank you very much for your comments. And I want to invite Mr. Yuri Parkhomenko, who may disclose the situation in more details, in figures. So what's the situation since the beginning of the year? I will start my report that since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, the risk for getting into slavery grew, and we understand that the part of the people got relocated inside the country, somebody went abroad, but some of the people were forcibly deported to Russian Federation and Belarus. The risks are huge because the people end up without jobs, without money, without their homes. Yes, the government takes care of the children, the government evacuates the educational institutions, but the risk of human trafficking is still pretty large. As of today, there is a small issue. The incorrect information about the human trafficking situation, for example, online, in World Wide Web, there is information spread about 100,000 citizens of Ukraine who suffered due to human trafficking. Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion of Russian Federation, the Department of Migration Policy of National Police of Ukraine coordinated their work with the European colleagues. A European platform for information exchange was created along with Ukrainian task force who exchange information online, and every European country who get involved in this group, they provide information on human trafficking who are related to citizens of Ukraine in their territory. We hold a meeting every month and we maintain the statistic data in the territory of Europe. Also, by initiative of Ukraine, there were amendments to the so-called impact plans because they were prepared in year 2020. They did not contemplate war in Ukraine, and those plans were substantially amended. And as of today, since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, there were 4 global operations in European Union with the participation of Ukraine to prevent the human trafficking. Thus, there was children trafficking information and prevention of sexual exploitation, prevention of beggary, and prevention of labor exploitation. All the countries reported on these operations. They provided exact details, and the picture we have is as follows. There were really 50 reports related to human trafficking, and there were only 6 criminal cases opened by the facts upon such reports. And even after the investigation, we found out that such information was not confirmed. I can give you an example of one case where one citizen of Ukraine accompanied his 2 nephews under 18 years, and the information was not confirmed, and the situation was sorted out. And by initiative of Ukraine, during one of operations plans, during one of the operations, there was a group in Ternopil region who persuaded and sent our Ukrainian women to Wrocław in Poland. 2 persons were detained in Ukraine, and 2 more are wanted. The information was passed on to the law enforcement agencies in Poland. We're in constant coordination with them. We coordinate our efforts with Monica, who is the head of a relevant department in Poland. I mean, the Human Trafficking Prevention Agency. And Poland detained 2 more persons in their territory, and they liberated 4 of our girls from sexual slavery. And just last week there was an information of an opened case in Germany about the exploitation of a 15-year girl in Germany. The investigation is still in process, is in progress. We cannot confirm any information just yet. We will only be able to give you a summary as soon as the investigation ends. So there was a number of measures taken for prevention of human trafficking. There were 2 more groups identified in Kiev region who were persuading and sending our girls to Turkey. So we can say we rescued more than 30 girls, and the relevant persons were detained. I won't repeat myself about that case in Ternopil region. There was also a case in Khmelnytsk region where our people were tried to get involved in beggary, and also there were people used in farms as for labor exploitation. And the most important case that I would like to tell you about, back in 2021 there was a problem with the sailors. Is the problem all the law enforcement agencies know about. There are groups in Ukraine which persuade the people who know how to handle the boats. They get involved in transportation of migrants from Turkey to Italy or Greece, and then further on from Greece to Italy. First of all, I was thinking that with the beginning of the war, it would be more difficult for the people to cross the border only upon the permit of a border guard in case they have multiple children or they are involved in volunteer activity. But one such group in Chernihiv region was trying to recruit so-called sailors for their exploitation, specifically for transportation of migrants from Turkey to Italy. So the group was detained. 4 of our so-called sailors were rescued from so-called slavery. And all the participants of that group were handed the suspicion. They were convicted under Articles 149 and 333, the transportation across the forced transportation across the border. And for the time being, we have to understand that the risks are still high. We coordinate our efforts with International Organization for Migration, with A21, with other partners, and we take a lot of preventive measures in order not to have the human trafficking related crimes happen. It's the dissemination of SMS messages to our citizens across Europe. It's the creation of a chatbots. One of them was created by Lviv National University. Is the posting of information and social media. Our Ministry of Interior is involved in this process, along with such organization as A21. And there is another powerful chatbot which is called Safe Woman. It was created by a Canadian organization, Search, with the help of the National Police and other agencies. These are the chatbots that people can use. They have information on human trafficking. They have contact details in where our people can apply to or report to in Europe. So I encourage everybody to use it. For the citizens of Ukraine, I would like to say that the risks are still high, and the situations related to human trafficking may happen in future. There are people who want to make money on that. There are people who understand that many people are in a desperate situations, and there will be two types of crimes. They are human trafficking and fraud. I have to mention one case in Holland where our citizens of Ukraine in Holland committed fraud against other Ukrainian citizens in Holland. They offered good conditions of employment, and the group was detained by the local police of the Netherlands. The situation is under control. I would encourage everybody not to listen to this incorrect and fraudful information in internet and use only reliable details. Dear speakers, I would like to invite you for the questions from journalists, and dear friends, you can ask your questions. Please introduce yourself and tell whom your question is addressed to. Urina Udodenko, Ukrinform. I have a question to Mr. Parkhomenko. Can you please tell us what can you advise to the Ukrainians who are currently abroad, who are most vulnerable? How can they protect themselves against becoming a victim of human trafficking? As I already mentioned, you have to be careful. almost in all the countries there are information resources created, where there are in some countries people can receive them during registration. So first of all, you have to always get registered in the country you're staying at. First of all, it gives you legal grounds to stay in the country. Secondly, the people will receive some financial aid. Is different in every country. The approach is different in every country. In some countries, there are the conditions are better for employment. In other countries, the financial aid is better. But first thing everyone has to do to stay legally in this or that country in order not to end up there illegally, because first of all they can infringe the terms of staying in the country, and due to some difficult condition become a victim of human trafficking. And during the registration in many countries, our people receive so-called information materials for employment. Estonia, Lithuania and Latvia do it in a pretty good way. We understand they are small countries, so they maybe there's not such a big scale of work to do, and they offer very good mechanisms for employment. They translate these materials into Ukrainian language. And third, we have to use internet in a careful way. We understand that the majority of the offers of illegal nature are represented by the so-called messages on the internet. So even if you use internet, don't pay anything ahead. You may be offered to pay something for employment, and you don't need to look for, so to say, doubtful employment. I mean such employment as dancers or massage or taxi drivers for transportation of citizens from one EU country to another. The so-called sailors who get involved in transportation of they get involved in such criminal activities as transportation of migrants. They are being told you're gonna be all right, you will just transport people by sea from Greece to Italy or the other way around. So people have to be careful. They have to take their employment with responsibility. I think everything is going to be all right that way, because the majority of countries, they try to protect our citizens in their territory, and also many countries today so to say they're trying to prevent the accompaniment of the children before under 18 years without adults. So Poland was mostly progressive. They gathered all the children, all the Ukrainian children under 18 years in the Stalevo Volia premise. They got in touch with the government of our country, and all the children were handed to the legal representatives. Thank you. Thank you. One more question. I would like to detailize. What's the number of internally relocated persons become the victims of the human trafficking since the beginning of the full-scale invasion? Well, I know about those 4 girls in Wrocław and maybe 1 girl in Germany, but the investigation is not over yet. In the Netherlands, there is an investigation with regard to labor exploitation, and our European colleagues say that Ukrainian citizens may be involved, but we don't know the figures, we don't know the numbers, but they say that there may be Ukrainian citizens. If we don't take into account the forcibly deported, because the situation is most complicated with them, and the national police in that case takes different actions, and us as the Department of Criminal Analysis and Department of Migration Policy, we got engaged other bodies of the Ministry of Interior to identify the people who are forcibly deported. It's more than 20,000 people, and we have to understand that during identification we may only have name or only the phone number or the place of registration, because it was the information provided by the neighbors or just passers-by, and the information is incomplete. So as of today, maybe about 75% of such people are identified. The information is transferred to the Office of Prosecutor General as we work under this investigation, and then this information is handed over to the Security Service of Ukraine, and Security Service of Ukraine, in coordination with other agencies, takes care of bringing those people back to Ukraine. There are some people on that list who were not deported, and we now understand that they were listed, but during the warfare, some of their relatives were thinking those people ended up in Russian Federation, but we found out that they were actually in Ukraine. And there are even cases when such citizens were found in the territory of Ukraine and then left abroad to the West. So it's more than 50 such cases for the time being. So sometimes there's some people who are listed as forcibly deported. They did not, in fact, end up in Russian Federation or Belarus. Out of them, we don't have understanding of the number of people who end up as victims of human trafficking. Some people return to Lithuania, Latvia, or Estonia, and law enforcement agencies of those countries, upon our request, they screen the people for situations of human trafficking. But for the time being, we don't have any reports from our European partners about such human trafficking situations. Any more questions, friends? I see that there are no more questions in this studio. I want to thank you. Thank you for this useful information. I would just like to add in short this question that was asked. Maybe there is information that in Ukraine now there are centers created for support of the rescued ones. So any person who is internal refugee, they can come to that place and get a complex help. These centers are created upon the initiative of Olga Stefanishina, Vice Prime Minister, and the initiative of the First Lady Olena Zelenska in Kyiv, Zaporizhia, Dnipro, and Lviv. And there are plans to open more of such centers. They cooperate with the law enforcement agencies and social services, depending on what kind of help such persons need. And in cooperation with Czech Republic and Germany, in those countries, such centers are about to be opened too, to support our Ukrainian men and women. Thank you. Thank you. I will remind you, we had Kateryna Pavlichenko with us. We had Chisi Miller, the Senior Protection Coordinator and International Organization for Migration, and Yuri Parkhomenko, the Head of Department of migration policy of National Police of Ukraine. Dear colleagues, thank you. I will remind you our next briefing is at 12 o'clock. We will have Alexander Sienkiewicz join us online, the mayor of Mykolaiv. Thank you. Bear with us. Glory to Ukraine.